Welcome to another week of Salute Your Sports. Common Enchev here with Tom Castleman. No Drew Brackett this week, Tom, but a really fun week. We're going to go over week one of the NFL season, which was a historic week. You'll find out why later in the show, as well as betting locks of the week. And we'll also talk some college football. Really looking forward to what should be a fun show. We're recording at night this week. This is past Drew's bedtime, so probably good. He's not here today.
Absolutely. And some really exciting games, including a couple of games with teams that lost in their conference championships last year. The Green Bay Packers were runner-ups in the NFC to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Buffalo Bills, of course, runners-up to the Kansas City Chiefs. And both teams came out with an 0-1 start to the season. The Bills losing in a pretty rough game against Pittsburgh. And I just mean that from the perspective of both sides just kind of were like, it was a grinded out kind of game. Packers losing in a much different form of a rough fashion, falling prey to Jameis Winston, the now biggest ambassador perhaps for LASIK eye surgery, and the five touchdown passes that he threw as the New Orleans Saints just absolutely clobbered Green Bay. So starting off with both these teams losing at home in week one, who's less likely to win a playoff game this year of the two teams? Or is this just kind of, it's week one and we should just kind of move on?
First off, can I address Jameis Winston real fast?
You may address him. You have the floor.
You are aware of what happened in our fantasy league, right?
I am.
Like, I actually started Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, like, you start Aaron Rodgers over Jameis Winston. Like, it's an obvious decision. But I'm sitting there cracking up when Jameis Winston has 5 touchdowns and Aaron Rodgers has 3 fantasy points. And, like, we'll see what happens with my team. But I think this week I had arguably the most historic fantasy season or week ever in terms of underachievement. I had Aaron Rodgers and Ezekiel Elliott combined for 8 points in a PPR league, in like a league where the scoring is just like up for every category. I think the league settings.
Yeah.
And I had 8 points from them. And then I had Ronald Jones in the slot, wide receiver, running back, tight end, and he got negative fantasy points.
He was better than nobody. Nobody played.
Yeah, and here's the irony. I basically drafted my team and my girlfriend's team. Like, I mostly picked her starters for her, and then she kind of picked the bench players based on who looked friendly.
Okay, that's fair.
But basically, her fantasy team is now in first place, and I'm in last. So it's like the team I drafted for her is in first. My team is in last. Of course, this is week one, so it's way, 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 way too early. But I remember the biggest pick that I had her draft, and she was going to get someone else. I told her to get Amari Cooper, and he showed up for her. So that was a big hit. As far as the games, I guess we'll start with the Saints-Packers one because we were just talking famous Jameis. I think this is sort of concerning, sort of not for Green Bay. I lean more on the not so concerning just because Aaron Rodgers was out pretty much. He didn't play in the preseason, came late to camp. Like, the focus isn't there. I know, we think of these athletes as superhuman, but they are human. And I think they all need to get back into shape, game action. So I think Aaron Rodgers is going to do better. And I think in both of these cases, the Bills and Packers games, if you look at the total yards, they didn't get that dominated. You look at Buffalo, actually, they had 371 total yards, which is not bad against a really good Pittsburgh defense. They just weren't clutch. 8 for 18 on third down, 1 for 3 on fourth down. They outgained Pittsburgh 371 to 252. And they had 1 turnover, a fumble. So it wasn't like, they completely got dominated or they had tons of turnovers. I think in both of these teams' cases, I'm not necessarily concerned about them making the playoffs or even winning their divisions. I think they're both going to win a playoff game. In terms of who's less likely, I lean towards the Packers because the one thing that is concerning for Green Bay is that, and we saw this when Rodgers has been hurt in the past. When Rodgers doesn't deliver, they struggle. They struggle when he doesn't deliver. I actually think Aaron Jones is pretty good, but I think Rodgers makes him much better. I think he makes the defense better, the running game better, and the whole team better. I think he covers up a lot of weaknesses. And when Rodgers has an off game, Green Bay has no chance. And Buffalo, in a way, is sort of similar, given their run game isn't great, but they actually ran the ball pretty good this last week. So I think it's one of those deals where it's sort of like what we were talking about college football last week. I think, Clemson and Oklahoma, like the Bills and Packers were in the conference title games. Like they have to at least get there for it to be a success. So am I concerned about them making the playoffs or winning a playoff game? No. But do I think either of those teams are going to make the Super Bowl or even make the conference title games? I'm not so sure they do that. So I think both of them have to be concerned in that sense. But it's week one. It's week one.
Yeah, absolutely. Like all the caveats of small sample size and whatnot. I'm not concerned about either team in terms of making the playoffs. I would say I think the Packers are more likely to not win any playoff games this year. I think they'll run away with the division simply for the fact that we saw what Minnesota and Detroit and Chicago all did on Sunday. And the Packers, while they didn't play particularly well either, arguably you could say that maybe the Vikings or even the Lions played the best game with their comeback to nearly cover the spread against the San Francisco 49ers, came within a possession of tying the game. But just based on pedigree, the Packers, I think, are better off than the rest of their division. So making the playoffs should be a relative breeze. But looking at Green Bay, it took an MVP season from Aaron Rodgers last year to propel this team to a conference championship game. And if Aaron Rodgers isn't at that level, the Packers didn't really do a whole lot in the offseason to get better around him. So their margin for error with a 37, 38-year-old quarterback, and granted, Tom Brady kind of skews the number on this a little bit with how well he's playing at his age. But by and large, once you start to get right around Aaron Rodgers' age, regardless of how good you've been, there's a significant risk for some drop-off. And even if the drop-off is only from MVP quarterback to really good starting quarterback, that's still enough, I think, for Green Bay to potentially come up short when it comes to playoff time. With the Bills, I'm not as concerned about them because they played against a hellacious defense. The one thing I am concerned about is that they allowed points from Ben Roethlisberger, who looked absolutely cooked as far as his ability to throw downfield. But I think Pittsburgh just kind of won their style of game of we're just going to grind it out. I don't know if the Bills are necessarily as built for that simply because so much of their running game's around their quarterback. They don't really have a, ground and pound running back with, Devin Singletary or even Zach Moss. So I think the Bills will be fine. I think they stand a pretty good chance to win a playoff game. I'm more concerned about the Packers, but it's clinical at best. I don't mind struggle.
I have a couple questions for you. I guess just a couple quick ones on this last topic before we move on. So first off, how many? So 17 game season this year, right? So how many games does Green Bay have to win the division? Because I think they're gonna go like 10-7. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think they'll get double-digit wins. They're the Packers, but I think this division, like, they can probably go like 7-10 and win the division. I really think that is possible, given how
you think it's like NFC East quality.
It's and we'll get to that in a little bit, but I think it is in a way NFC East quality. I just think that Aaron Rodgers is like so good that Green Bay will finish above 500. I think Washington was 7-9 last year and made the playoffs, but I think 7 wins to me is probably enough to win this division. Given if you really put it into perspective, how abysmal the Bears defense looked, how abysmal the Lions defense looked, and the Bears and Vikings are weird because a few years ago they were really strong defensive teams, but now they're horrendous.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I think 9-8 actually can do it. I think 9-8 can probably do it for Green Bay, is my guess.
And then here's the other one, Pittsburgh. Is this I know we were talking about how, and obviously, I said this, all three have a chance. There's not large separation. But given what we saw week one, I know obviously Baltimore had a ton of injuries and continue to have a ton of injuries. And, my overrated guy, Lamar Jackson, continues to fumble away the games. But do we think that Pittsburgh, did we kind of sell them short a little bit? I know Cleveland looked impressive, but then they browned at the end with the punter. Do we think that Pittsburgh has a legitimate chance to win another AFC division title? Who's the favorite of those three? Let's play overreaction, underreaction. Can we label Pittsburgh the favorite in the division after that impressive road win in Buffalo?
I'm still going to lean towards Baltimore. Granted, they had a rough spate of injuries when we made our preseason picks, especially on the defensive side of the football. My biggest
concern too.
And the running backs as well, absolutely. Much to the chagrin of a significant portion of my fantasy football teams. I was quick enough on the waiver wire to cover up for that, though. Picking up Tyshawn Williams, who John Harbaugh inexplicably decided to outrun the ball more than 9 times. But that's a grievance for another day. I think Pittsburgh definitely has put themselves in the conversation. Considering that preseason I was going Baltimore and Cleveland as the division winner and wild card respectively, Pittsburgh's absolutely in that discussion now. My concern primarily, again, is with the quarterback, with Ben Roethlisberger. Did not look great throwing the ball downfield, and we kind of saw him start out okay last season and descend to where he was toward the end. And so maybe it's just long season, got tired, etc. But when you start out the season from here, I don't really know, because again, this is a
Tom. We lost him. Modern day technology of doing Zoom. We lost you for a second there.
You're back. We're back. My camera just turned off and now turned back on. Okay, so where was I? Concerned about Ben Roethlisberger primarily, right?
Yes.
Okay, we got a little bit of a delay, but we'll just push through it. So primarily concerned about Ben Roethlisberger's ability to push the ball downfield. He has plenty of weapons around him. The team's pretty good. He just has to be decent enough for them to be okay. I still give a slight edge to Baltimore, but as always, those divisional games are going to be so huge later on down the road. And Baltimore's certainly going to be having a
Paging Tom Castleman.
I have I literally have everything else turned off.
Huh.
It's we'll just
give it a go here. Hopefully it works. But just
we can move on to the next topic.
Yeah, you're this topic is bad luck for us. But you're sticking with Baltimore. I'm gonna go with Cleveland. I had Baltimore at one point, then I switched to Cleveland.
You switched to Cleveland,
and I feel good about Cleveland because I think I know it was a loss, but what they did against the Chiefs, I think, was very impressive. And the next topic sort of transitions into this. We had the NFC West go 4-0, the Rams dominating the Bears, the Cardinals with probably the most surprising performance of the week. Not surprising they won, but surprising that they won by, what was it, 25? What was it? I got to pull it up.
I think it was 38-13, something like that.
38-13. I think they won by 25. And then obviously Seattle also pretty dominant at Indianapolis. And the 49ers, I don't know. I don't know what to think of that game just because San Francisco was up so much. I don't know if they took it easy or they lost focus. The Lions really made it close late. But I think, and I know San Francisco just had, of course, given what happens to them, another injury. Raheem Mostert out for the season. That one hurts. But then I think the AFC North, as we just talked about with the Steelers and Browns playing well week one. And then we also had the AFC West go 4-0. How about that? The Broncos a dominant win. The Raiders a big win against the Ravens. The Chiefs, obviously, the Chiefs did what the Chiefs did. The Chargers winning at the Washington football team, who sadly has an injury to Ryan Fitzpatrick. I wanted to see him play this year. What do we think is the best division in football? I know it's really early. I think the AFC West probably overachieved this week. But where do we land on this? And maybe I should ask, what is what are some of the best divisions? 'Cause I think we're going to go the same way on this question, personally.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with the NFC West just because of the depth top to bottom. We talked about it preseason. I mean, I have both wild card teams coming out of the NFC West, and the Cardinals are one of those teams that if they were in any other division, more or less, like they would win the NFC North, I think. If they were in that division, they
Over Green
would.
Bay, really?
I think so. I think so. Like, again, this is small sample size, so like, can their defense hold up for an entire season? But they looked really good against a pretty decent offensive team in Tennessee.
More than decent.
More than decent. Like if you take the Cardinals and maybe put them in the AFC South, with Colts and Jaguars and Texans and Titans, like sure. So basically that's a team that's a division that has four teams that are wild card at worst, division winners at best if you spread out the talent around. So that's what I'll stick with as best.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that's the best division. I think my question is, like, I don't know about the Cardinals. Like, do we really think, like, they're legitimate? Because they were really hot at one point last year, and then they cooled off. I think Kyler Murray sometimes looks like literally a faster Patrick Mahomes, which is scary. He had that play where he scrambled around, went backwards, and, hit his receiver. DeAndre Hopkins, maybe the best receiver in the NFL, maybe. Certainly top 2 or 3, if not number 1. I mean, I don't know. Are the Cardinals a legitimate contender in the division? Because I think we both picked the Rams. I mean, I feel pretty good about the Rams in that division. But can the Cardinals make the playoffs? Or are they for Rio? Because, I mean, I think Tennessee's a really, really good football team. I know they're terrible on defense, but their offense alone has got them. Basically, they've arguably been the second best team in the NFL the last 2 years. I mean, 2 years ago, they're in the AFC title game. And last year, they hosted a home playoff game given they choked. But that's record-wise, that's been a really successful Tennessee team.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think I'm thinking that's probably just like a case of the week ones. Where like Tennessee came out looking a little bit flat. I don't anticipate them looking quite so flat over the rest of the season, though.
Well, I'm going to tease this for statement of the week, but I mean, we had. Oh, actually, I don't know how to tease it without giving it away. But let's just say the underdogs.
There's a tease.
The underdogs did quite well in week 1, and I don't know if some of that like has to do with maybe I'm overthinking this, but like players playing less in preseason. Less games, coaches less willing to play their guys in preseason. I mean, certainly, I think that might have affected the Packers. I think certainly, but then again, it didn't seem to affect Dak Prescott, who played pretty good. So
yeah, nor Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, so it certainly varies. So I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I do think the AFC West. I said this last week. They're one of those divisions that has potential. Like, I don't know if you watched the show Ted Lasso. Like, I absolutely love it.
I haven't seen it.
Like, he says, like, he, like, walks in the room and he says, smells like potential. And that's basically what the Raiders and Chargers and, quite frankly, Broncos are. I mean, they have potential. Like, I think those teams are maybe a couple years away. I mean, we almost saw the Chargers literally throw an interception and blow the game against Washington. Then Washington blows it back with a turnover of their own, but I think that's a division to look out for because Derek Carr, wildly inconsistent, but also very, very talented, and I think that could give the Raiders some momentum. I mean, we saw the Raiders beat the Chiefs last year, and then I think the Broncos. I talked about this in our preseason show, but they've got some young receivers, some young tight ends, and a pretty good defense at times. I know the Giants are a terrible team, but that was an impressive week 1 win. And I look at the Chargers. I mean, Justin Herbert, that man is a beast. He is a beast. And I think, behind Mahomes and Allen, I think, he has the potential to be the number 3 guy for years to come. We'll see what happens with Deshaun Watson. Obviously, if he comes back, then maybe he's there. But I just, I can't cheer for him. But we'll see.
That ship has long since sailed.
We'll see what happens with him. But I think Herbert is up there for one of the best young quarterbacks in the league, and it's going to be exciting to watch him play. It's early. That's the one thing. One thing to keep in mind. It's early. But I mean, what is maybe the worst division? I mean, we talked about this. Is it the North or is it the NFC East? Because they're both pretty bad.
Yeah, and maybe throw in the AFC South as a contender as well. I mean, Houston looked pretty good against Jacksonville, but I mean, Houston looked good against Jacksonville. Like, let's be honest, like that's not really a good looking team there.
Have you heard the rumor that Urban Meyer might leave right away and go to USC because they fired Clay Helton?
It's been done before. I mean, didn't Bobby Petrino bail on the Falcons to go to Louisville, and then I think Nick Saban made it to the end of the season for Miami.
Right.
If I remember correctly, before he bolted for Alabama. But yeah, like professional coaches or college coaches are finding that the pastures aren't always greener at the professional level.
Well,
that'd be wild though.
Entirely different setting because the professionals are really, really good and they get paid. Although I guess the Jaguar professionals aren't really good, just because we saw
they're professionals. That's the difference, though.
They're professionals, but they were 1-15 last year. That, by the way, that was a pick I had in Locks of the Week. I was all over Houston, and I was very, very happy because normally those bets always seem to go right down to the wire. Always
that was a smooth sailing.
That was a smooth sailing bet. I was just enjoying myself with that game. I do think that it's different. The professionals respond differently to a college coach, and it's the same with Nick Saban. I guess Nick Saban's a big he'll get in your face, and I think Urban Meyer's probably the same way. Not every athlete responds to that, and it doesn't work. Doesn't work for everyone. But I think Urban Meyer had to know when he took this job. Did he not realize how bad this team was? I don't know what he thought he was gonna do there, because Urban Meyer is probably a good coach. I think he would be good in the NFL as well. Again, he's got his own issues off the field, but on the field, he's a smart football mind. But you can't just go in and do anything. I mean, I've said this before on this show, and we've talked off air, and I say this to people coach, don't get me wrong, coaching matters, especially in football. It matters more than any sport because of the strategy. But ultimately, I think the players are more important. A great coach can make mediocre players average, average players good, good players great. A great coach can't make awful players mediocre. He can make them slightly mediocre, but he's not going to get them to average. So I think that's a problem in Jacksonville for sure. But I think it's an exciting week one. There was a lot of upsets. It's the theme of 2021. I know we saw in tennis, Novak Djokovic lost the calendar slam to, I think, Medvedev. He can be your new adopted guy because Tsitsipas has a lot of issues. I know you went back and forth between those guys. But it's been the year of the upsets, the underdogs. Dominated week one. I'm going to go fully into detail on that in Statement of the Week. I will have some perspective and some historic remarks about how well the underdogs did. But I think everyone had a hard time picking games. I think I was 9-7 in our NFL Picks Can Pick 'em group, and I think I'm in first place in I
think we tied. Yeah.
Are we both in first?
I think we have the same record. I'm pretty sure.
We think alike on a lot of these picks. I think Drew's under 500. I know that, and
ironically, somebody is.
and Drew picked the most upsets actually of any of us. But he actually missed the upsets. He picked the wrong games to pick the upsets, because I know I got it with Houston. I think he might have had the Giants, which did not work out well for him. But anyways, Drew Brackett is I don't know. He's the NBA expert. He called the Bucks, so let's not rag on him too much while he's not on the show. But in terms of NFL, I think we're going to find out a lot more about these teams. I do think that I still lean the NFC East as the worst division, just because I think, Dallas is probably the best team in that division. Dak Prescott, wildly impressive. Ezekiel Elliott will do better, but Dallas has a bad defense. Green Bay's defense is not bad. They looked bad, but that was like sometimes like in small sample size, if you convert in key moments, like Jameis Winston had 5 touchdowns, he had like 145 pass yards. So
Yeah.
it's not like New Orleans went up and down the field at will. I mean, you see 38 points, you assume that like they did everything right, and they did very well, but it was one of those cases where the scoreboard may not have been indicative of the talent. You know, there's moments and certain things flip games one way or another. But I think we're going to see some of these favorites do better as the season goes along, especially some of these guys who didn't play as much in preseason, like on Aaron Rodgers, etc. But as a Bears fan, really, really disappointing start to the season. And what worries me is that obviously Justin Fields should start. We're not going to debate that.
Yeah.
But I think their defense regressing hurts. But let's move on to week 2. Let's talk about a few big matchups week 2. Let's start with probably the most exciting matchup. I think Chiefs-Ravens. Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, round 4.
Yeah.
My guy Mahomes has won the first 3 rounds. A team game, of course, but
sure.
he's had the best of Lamar Jackson. I think I saw the stats too. Like he's 3-0 against Lamar Jackson, 3-0 against Josh Allen, 3-0 against Baker Mayfield. Probably I think 1-0 against Herbert because I think Mahomes sat late in the season when the Chargers beat him the last week of the season. But Mahomes has all these young guns number, to say the least.
Well, and he's surrounded by an incredible a team, a front office that watched the same Super Bowl that we all did, saw the glaring weakness that was the offensive line, and then went out and actually did something about it. Novel concept to more than a couple of teams in the NFL, but I will not name them in this particular segment. This is going to be a fantastic looking game. I'm looking forward to it. I think this is the Sunday night game, right?
Sunday night game.
Okay, I think NBC will do much better for viewing content this week than they did last week.
I don't know what they were thinking about with the Rams Bears on week 1.
I was about to text you like maybe it's not a great idea to be putting up like a full possession, a full 8-point underdog, but then Dallas was an underdog by 8 points to Tampa Bay, and that ended up being a really fun game, actually.
And no offense to the Bears, like we're huge Bears fans, and the Bears are a national brand.
Actually,
but
all offense to the Bears. All offense to the Bears.
Well, compared to the Cowboys, though, like the Cowboys are like, and we talked about this on the show, I think last year at some point, the Cowboys are like, you either love to cheer for them or against them. They're like the New York Yankees. Even when they're not good, they're relevant because it's the Cowboys. I think, America's team. So you'll get like some eyeballs tuning in to watch the Cowboys play. You'll get that a little bit with the Bears, but not to the same extent, I think. So it's a different story there. So yeah,
for sure.
But
this game will be a lot more fun.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a great game. First off, the last few meetings, the Chiefs winning 27-24 in OT in 2018. That was the game where 2 of Mahomes' greatest passes ever were made. He had a no-look pass, and then he had one where he's running across the field, like 3 guys in his face, down the sideline, chucks it like 50 yards to Tyreek Hill on 4th down that eventually forced overtime. But the next 2 matchups were all Kansas City. I think I actually covered the one in 2019. I finished 33-28, was the first professional sports game I covered when I worked in Missouri. A professional football game. That's not true. I've covered professional baseball before and basketball. But it was an incredible game. But the Chiefs dominated in the second quarter. They were up like double digits, and the Ravens got one of those like late game scores that made it from like 12 points, 13 points to 5 points. So it was like not indicative of the game. And then last season, Kansas City won in Baltimore 34-20, and Baltimore had a kick return touchdown in that game. So, I mean, it was all Kansas City in that game. And I just don't see how it's not all Kansas City. I mean, we'll talk about this in locks of the week. I think the line is 3.5. Like, man, I feel great about the Chiefs covering that line just because, like, how are the Ravens going to keep up with the Chiefs scoring? I mean, we talk about this, like Mahomes, by the way, 10-6, best record ever when down double digits. Lamar Jackson is the opposite. Like, he doesn't do well in double digits. Like, if the Chiefs hop on him early, they get up 14-0, Ravens have to pass the ball, they're in trouble. Like,
Mhm.
And Jackson did a little bit better passing week 1. I know they got Sammy Watkins, who, if healthy, is good. But it's just like the last few seasons we've seen it. It's just not a good matchup for Baltimore for whatever reason. And you talked about like the injuries to the running backs and the injuries to their defensive players. Like that's what they need to stay in this game with the Chiefs. I think this isn't going to be close. I think it'll be exciting in that like we'll see a lot of points and Lamar is going to make a couple of really great plays with his legs. But I can see this game being like 31-21, 35-24, maybe like 40-24. Like I think it's going to be like, and if the Ravens do somehow cover, it'll be one of those deals where they're down 10 and they get a touchdown to make it 3 late in the game. I mean, do you think this is going to be all KC or is this going to be a close game?
I think this is going to be all KC. I don't know if it necessarily will be from jump, just because Baltimore has a tendency to play a pretty tight game for stretches when they're the lesser team, which isn't often because they have pretty good talent on both sides of the ball. But yeah, I don't see Kansas City really having much issue sweating this one out as far as winning outright goes, simply because, I mean, they have so many returning players on both sides of the ball that they don't really necessarily need a preseason. I think that they like it's week 1 and they're already humming. Like, yeah, they got down 20, what was it, 22-10 to Cleveland, and by the end of the game, it was like they were still behind, and it felt fait accompli that KC was going to win that game, and that's with a revamped, decent Cleveland Browns defense. So I don't think that KC's going to have much issue. I think the stat is like Andy Reid has not lost in September since like 2017 or 2016. Like it's been some ridiculously long time since Andy Reid has lost in the month of September.
And you know what the status for Mahomes? I don't remember the exact number.
It's 1 year less.
Right. No, I know it's 1 year less, but he has not thrown an interception in September.
I didn't know that.
30 something touchdowns. I want to say it's 35. I could look that up. You maybe look it up at home to get the exact stat, like for our listeners. But it's some ridiculous amount of touchdown passes.
Yeah.
And 0 interceptions in September for Mahomes. I mean, it's just wild. And that's the Chiefs. Like they actually 10-6 went down double digits with Mahomes. It's like you're waiting, like when are they going to come back? It's not like if, it's when. That's why the Super Bowl was so weird, because I was watching the Super Bowl expecting them to do it. And remember, they did that in the previous Super Bowl. They were down, I think, 20-10 entering the fourth quarter against the 49ers. And then I think they scored like 3 touchdowns, won 31-20. Like that, it's just, they can flip the switch like that. And it's just like, I just don't know like what you do with Mahomes, Kelce, and Hill. That is like the ultimate trio. I know we talk about like trios in like the NBA, like super teams. But I don't know that has there ever been a better trio in the history of sports? Honestly, if you think about it.
I mean, like, I know that we're adjusting for era, but like those early 90s Cowboy teams, from what I've like remember hearing, where you have Aikman at quarterback, Emmitt Smith at running back, when running back was a much more valued position, and then Michael Irvin. I mean, that's the one that comes to like top of mind, but like in this NFL, they're the standard.
And it's adjusted for era, so obviously not as easy to pass. I'm maybe a little harsh, but if you look at statistically, Troy Aikman and his touchdown to interception ratio, I've got him as like an overrated quarterback. Obviously very good. Like, he got the wins, and that trio is very, very good.
Won a Heisman too, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I actually look at the Chiefs trio though, like Hill and Kelce and Mahomes are better at their positions than Aikman. And honestly, I don't know, Hill or Irvin. That's a tough call, but I think
they're like completely different types of receivers too. That's the thing,
completely different types of receivers. But like I look at I think the Chiefs, you can make a case, have maybe 3 of the top 4 players in that scenario. I mean, I think Emmitt Smith, definitely. I would probably say Mahomes, then Smith. Well, I don't know. I would maybe say Mahomes, then Kelce, then Smith in terms of best at their position. But then you can
Right.
argue that running back is more important than tight end, at least back then. But I don't know. It's hard to say. But I think
Mm-hmm.
that, I mean, again, if you're talking about trios, like, greatest show on turf, Warner, and then Falk, and then you take Bruce or Holt, which one do you take? Like, I guess in the
Right.
first couple of years it's Bruce, then it's Holt afterwards.
Sure.
But I think it's such a good trio. It's just an incredible. If you look at the stats that game, Mahomes over 300 yards. Like, Hill and Kelsey put up like so many yards and catches and touchdowns. Like, you look at the rest of the receiving core, not much production from anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I talked about. Like, there are games where Hardman or, Pringle or who's their other receiver, Robinson, do something, but it's just like it's all built on Mahomes, Kelsey, and Hill, and
Yep.
you just like you can't stop it. Like, teams can't stop it. Like that play where Mahomes ran around, chucked it deep in the air to Hill, and it was a touchdown. Like, what can you do? What can you do with that? I think the Ravens are going to have a hard time stopping it, and I mean, I talked about this, like, and I was maybe like slightly nervous week one with the rough start Kansas City had, but I think this is like one of those seasons where Kansas City's upset at what happened last season. And you talked about the offensive line; they addressed it, but honestly, their offensive line was not that bad last year. They had injuries; that's what
Mm-hmm.
hurt them. They had their best Pro Bowl offensive lineman go down in the AFC Championship game in Fisher, and they had Mitchell Schwartz go down earlier in the season, a really good lineman. And then they had the guy whose name I struggle to pronounce, who missed COVID or missed the season because he was a healthcare worker helping people with COVID. I mean, they actually had 3 starters from the previous year not playing the Super Bowl, so they're fine. The big game that I want to talk about, like, maybe it's not as interesting, but to me it is, like, the Seahawks Titans. Just because I look at like Tennessee, like, do they start 0-2? Like, are they in trouble then? I mean, who do we like in this Seattle Tennessee game? Because you're right, like, if Tennessee starts 0-2, like, that AFC South all of a sudden really starts looking like another like worst division in football for sure. Because I think Seattle, I was very impressed with what they did week one. Wilson, Lockett, Metcalf looked pretty good.
Yeah, speaking of trios, like I do like Seattle in that game. The interesting thing is going to be, what are the aberrations and what are going to be the trends coming out of week one and into the rest of the season. It usually takes a couple of weeks to actually figure those out. But we saw last year Tyler Lockett have several big boom games, and this was one of them where he caught 2 long touchdown passes. And then we've seen games where he does next to nothing as a wide receiver. So is what he had in week one going to be an aberrative week to kind of sort of make up a word there? And then on the flip side for Tennessee, Derrick Henry having the historic season that he had last year with a lot of wear and tear. And we know that for running backs, just like with quarterbacks, there is an expiration date. There is a point at which the player is no longer effective. I mean, cite Todd Gurley, for example, who's currently not on a team despite several running back injuries around the NFL. Derrick Henry didn't look particularly strong, got stuffed a couple times at the goal line. Is that going to be an aberration, or is that going to be more of the trend? So this is going to be a really interesting game just from that perspective, because I don't trust either defense particularly, overly. I don't trust them, in short. So it's going to be interesting to see the offensive talent. Is Tannehill going to play a better game? Is Derrick Henry going to be a more effective running back? Or are we going to start to see some pretty sharp declines on that side for Tennessee? Because if so, Titans are going to be in trouble this year.
Yeah, 5.5 line. That's what's really interesting to me. Like, who covers that line? I think it's going to be interesting. And come on, I meant to write this down. And this game is in Tennessee or is it in Seattle? Let's see.
That's a good question. I don't know off the top of my
Seattle's
head.
at home. I have it written down. I like Seattle at home. So good at home, having the fans, the 12th man. Seattle has vulnerabilities in the secondary. I think that's something that Tennessee can exploit. But I like Seattle. And like, you look at Seattle, like, they start 2-0. That's big for them. And that division is big. Like, every win matters in that NFC West. Even like the out of conference games are really important. I do think that Tennessee is going to rebound, though. I don't think they're going to be Houston of last year. Houston went in with the expectations and really slid, starting 0-4 with a tough schedule. I don't think that we're going to see that from Tennessee. I think Derrick Henry getting stuffed at the one twice. I don't see that happening again. By the way, I did like DraftKings daily fantasy. I put in $3. I doubled up to $6, which was not bad on Sunday's action. But I had Wilson, who delivered for me. I had Metcalf though, so like Metcalf did good, but Lockett had a lot more points. So I was upset watching it, where it was like, give Metcalf the touchdowns, come on. And then I also had the one guy I had who did do really bad that prevented me from winning more was Henry. And I was watching the game, he got stuffed at the one twice. I was furious. I was like, come on, Derek, do what you do. You're big.
Right.
Power through. And he's going to have to be much better if they're going to win that game. I do think Seattle wins that game, but I'm not as concerned about Tennessee. I think Tennessee is going to rebound. They'll have some easy games in the division to get them going because I'm more concerned about the Colts. They looked in disarray against Seattle. And I think it's going to be a fun week 2. We'll see how the underdogs do because they certainly won more than they lost in week 1. And I just, in my head, I see those big lines, like the Browns line. And I'm not going to have them in locks of the week because I try and stay away from the big lines. But like the Falcons are supposed to get trashed. And I'm just in my head, like the Falcons will cover against the Bucs. Like
they'll cover two touchdowns.
Yeah. And that's what they did against the Chiefs last year. So it's like, and you were happy, by the way. You had the Eagles against the Falcons, and that was
a good one.
That was a very comfortable win. That was like your Houston, Jacksonville one for you. Like and the Bears one was pretty comfortable for us also. So like that was
comfortable enough that I switched over to doing something else with my Sunday evening.
Yeah. You texted me you were playing video games. What video games do you play?
Currently, I am on Assassin's Creed Odyssey, the one that takes place in ancient Greece. So cool. I'm just exploring that. Yeah.
I'm more of a sports video gamer, but I got to dust off the old PS2, open it up. You're probably on like PS4. You're all modern.
I'm on the Xbox One now. Yeah, I'm pretty modern.
Xbox One?
Yeah.
Wait, is that the original? Is that a new one or is that the original one?
So the original one's just Xbox. The Xbox One came out around like 2013 or 14, something like that. Jen and I got it when we got married. That was our wedding presents to each other. We were just like, let's just pitch in and get an Xbox.
So Drew's not on the show this week. He's probably the one who has like the most modern version. He's
probably
the big gamer. Tom and I are like old school with our Xbox One and PS2. Like, why not? So I need to dust it off and play some FIFA. That's what I need to do.
I hope that it works. My PS2, unfortunately, I think is pretty much kaput. So I hope that yours is still good to go.
Well, I did randomly play once about an year and a half ago, and it worked a year and a half ago. So we'll see.
Fingers crossed.
I remember when I was living in Missouri before I moved, I played at one point, but I have not played it in the last year. So we'll see. But I think that's anything else from week 1 in the NFL. I mean, for me, the underdogs stick out, and I'm going to have more on that in statement of the week, so I don't want to give away too much of it. But any other impressions and thoughts? I mean, I loved how many close games there were. I know you're not as big of a red zone guy as Drew and I, but the witching hour with Scott Hansen was certainly intriguing on Sunday for sure.
Yeah, no, it was a great week 1. And I'm looking forward to week 2. I'm also looking forward to week, 3 now for college football, where we've had a little bit of a shakeup in the rankings with some interesting matchups that we, I think on the ESPN Pick'em that we play, that had some interesting matchups there where I felt pretty decent early. And then by the end of the day, it's just like, oh my gosh, what has happened to literally everything?
Are you in last place?
Probably. I don't watch college football, so I probably am.
I think Drew's in first. I had just 3 of us. I can't. I feel like Drew's beating me, but I can't remember. It always goes down to the last week. I'll say this: I like freaked out with happiness about the ESPN College Pick'em, the way they do it, because they post the records that you have now. Not because we do like confidence points, which is what we determine as the winner. but for the longest time, I swear, like we've played that game where I would probably have the best record, granted by 1 or 2 wins, not by
Sure.
much. But there's been at least 3 or 4 years where I had like the best record and I did not win because my confidence points were not good. So I used to have to go back through and tally everyone's records so I can then tell Drew, you got lucky to beat me because I actually had more wins. You just picked the right games. But this year, it actually has the records for you. So hats off to ESPN College Pick'em. The one thing to me that is interesting, and this is my question for you, Iowa up to number 4. Oregon up to number 4. Iowa up to number 5. Oregon winning at Ohio State rather convincingly. And Iowa also winning at Iowa State. Again, that was one of those games where they're up more. I think Iowa State got a garbage touchdown late in the game. So we've got Oregon at number 4, Iowa at number 5. Very early in the season. But do we think one of these teams will make the playoff or none? And if so, which one is the more likely one to make the playoff of these two teams?
Well, I think Oregon's the more likely simply because, and I'm presuming that Ohio State's going to be the team in the Big Ten in the Big Ten championship game that Iowa will have to face. The Oregon Ducks don't have any such competition really in their conference. I mean, we saw USC lose.
UCLA, though, don't forget about UCLA. They dominated LSU. Undefeated UCLA.
If you had to pick a team against whom you were going to like pick the last spot for the playoff, I would rather take whoever's going up against UCLA against whoever's going for Ohio State, quite frankly. So I give Oregon the more likely chance to make the playoff. In fact, I think that they're probably, like you've got Oklahoma, Georgia, Alabama. I mean, Georgia and Alabama, one of those teams is going to have to lose because they're going to be playing each other. I mean, it's feasible that, both Iowa and Oregon can make it in. I think Oregon's more likely, though, just because of their conference.
Yeah, I think there's no way that they both make it. Even if they both go undefeated. Maybe.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
But, it's hard to go undefeated, and that's the thing with both of them. They have to go undefeated because,
yes.
Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen. But right now, Alabama and Georgia look so much further ahead of everyone. And if Alabama and Georgia go undefeated, they meet in the SEC championship, and it's a close game. I mean, it's one thing if, that you lose by 5 touchdowns. Yeah, you're not going to get in. But I think that's going to be a close game. Let's just draw it up the way we think it's going to happen. Alabama beats Georgia in a close game in the SEC title game. Georgia's getting in with one loss. They beat they beat Clemson the first game of the season. Huge win for them.
Sure.
They're getting in. And then Oklahoma struggled week 1, regrouped week 2. The Big 12 is a mess. The Big 12 is really bad this season. Iowa State losing to Iowa. They struggled week 1. Iowa State was clearly overhyped. Texas gets clobbered against Arkansas. Just dominated by Arkansas. And that was a really cool, how much the Razorback fans ran to it. I've worked in Arkansas, and I know how passionate that state is about their Woo Pig Suey. So that was a big win for that program. But Oklahoma, as bad as the Big 12 is, they're going to go undefeated. And if you're a preseason number 2 and you go undefeated, there's nothing keeping Oklahoma out of the playoff.
Right.
So to me, that leaves one spot. Honestly, here's my theoretical question. Let's just say Oregon and Iowa both go undefeated. And then Georgia has one loss. Georgia loses by 3 points to Alabama at the death. Last second kick. And Georgia completely dominates the rest of the schedule. I mean, are you going to put undefeated Iowa and Oregon over Georgia? I know a few years back, Florida State defending champs, undefeated, got in the playoff, got dominated as a 4 seed. But Oregon and Iowa don't have that pedigree, and they don't have that undefeated season. I actually think the committee, which has been known to favor the SEC, and rightfully so, by the way, because the SEC is the best conference. I think Oregon and Iowa have to go undefeated to have a chance. In that scenario, they both go undefeated. I think they're going to put Georgia in for sure over Oregon. The one case you can argue with Iowa is yes, if they play Ohio State, they beat Ohio State, maybe. But man, I'll be honest with you. I think that Georgia gets in that scenario over both of those teams. But that
You're
still leaves
probably
one spot, though. It leaves one
Mhm.
spot. I just don't see how they can both get in. I really don't.
Like I completely understand, and like that's most likely what the scenario would be. I mean, for me, I mean, I'm not on the college football committee, obviously. I kind of like I kind of like rewarding, you know,
The
winning your
resume.
conference. You know,
Oh,
I kind of like that. Because like if they were to do a more expanded playoff, obviously the Pac-12 winner, the Big Ten winner, like they would all make it in. This is one of those things where it's kind of like we're seeing in baseball this year, where the Giants and the Dodgers are going to have like the two best records in baseball, and one of them is going to end up in a coin flip game, and it's not fair. Like they both deserve to be in, but the teams that win the division, I think, they should get that precedent. So that's where I'm leaning on this one. I would prefer to see if we have four undefeated conference champions. I would rather see that, but I completely get if you're going on talent, which is what the committee's doing. Georgia's definitely going to be making it in then.
yeah. I think I'm an eye test guy.
Mm-hmm.
That's who I am. I like the eye test. I do think this about Oregon. They play at UCLA. I know it's early, but UCLA, man, UCLA has been really, really good. They're undefeated. They beat LSU by double figures. So that don't pencil that win in for Oregon. I mean, if I
Mm-hmm.
was betting my mortgage, I would pick Oregon. But don't be surprised if they fall against UCLA, and then the Pac-12 chances then would hinge on UCLA. But then again, like
Yeah.
I don't know, I don't buy UCLA. As far as Iowa, though, uh, they do have an interesting schedule because they also play Penn State at home. So that's another like good resume win. And
Mm-hmm.
let's not forget about Clemson. I think Clemson like has that pedigree. They're sort of like a mini Alabama. Um, if they happen to run the table the rest of the way, like Clemson still has a good shot. I do think Oregon a little bit more likely than Iowa, given that that win over Ohio State is really, really big. And that's a
For
road
sure.
win. You talk about Iowa, they beat Ohio State in the conference championship game. That'll be a neutral field game. So Oregon's road win at Ohio State is, well, I was going to say it's the best win in college football, but then I don't know if Georgia's win over Clemson on a neutral field is better. It's hard to argue, but it's one of, if not the best win of the season. So I agree. I think Oregon a little bit more likely than Iowa. My gut feeling says that neither one of them makes it. I just have a
Mm-hmm.
feeling they both trip up somewhere. And ironically, I was the one who said Oregon would be maybe the team that makes the playoff. I had Oregon and Notre Dame as my possible four spot when we did this thing, and I don't feel as good about Notre Dame right now, even though they are undefeated somehow, still barely. They're alive. They're alive. Their season's alive. The players are alive. No one is dead. No one is dead. Kelly.
Brian Kelly was not able to execute his team. He checked with the provost, and the provost said no.
Oh my goodness. Well, let's talk about a couple big matchups this week. As man, are you coming? Like, I don't think I'm delayed. Or is your audio like delayed? Is that you're not synced up well?
I don't think I'm synced up, and currently I think I'm frozen. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You are
Uh,
frozen at the moment.
yeah, no, I've got that. That's an
But have
awful
you
freeze frame.
have you been unsynced the whole time, or have you been
It's
going
been
from
in and
synced to
out.
unsynced? Okay,
It's in and out.
because I feel like at one point you were definitely synced, and then I was just watching and you were unsynced. So,
I'm gonna try
man,
stopping my video and coming back on, seeing what happens.
let's take a look.
All right, I'm not like doing a duck face or anything, so count that as a win.
Wonderful. Well, hopefully we'll get better internet connection next week. That's what happens these days. It's what happens.
Mm-hmm.
But let me ask you about a couple games this week. Penn State and Auburn, both 2-0, Big Ten SEC matchup. Who do we like in this game? We're talking about playoff teams, by the way. Penn State already beat Wisconsin this season. Now they've got Auburn, and they have games at Iowa and at Ohio State. I know, like, very unlikely they win both, maybe even lose both. But Penn State's another team, like, they beat Auburn. They've already beat Wisconsin. What if they beat
Mm-hmm.
Iowa and Ohio State? They're all of a sudden in playoff contention. They certainly have one of the toughest schedules in football. Do we like Penn State or Auburn in this Big Ten SEC showdown?
I mean, I got burned by Penn State more than a couple of times last year in terms of picking them in games. I'm gonna tie goes to the SEC in my book, so I'm gonna slightly favor Auburn. I have no idea what the bookies say on that line, but I think I like Auburn a little bit better than Penn State.
I want to say that it's a 6-point line for Penn State. Let me look this up.
Oh boy!
Yeah, you may have misjudged that one. Yeah, Penn State
upset
by 6.
Castleman.
Upset Castleman. Hey, the upsets have worked this year. Obviously, I think Ohio State was like a 2-touchdown favorite against Oregon. That line missed by 21 points. I do like Penn State simply because this is their whiteout game in their stadium, one of the coolest environments in sports. I think it's going to be rocking. I do think that has to help them a little bit in this game. And I think Penn State has a really, really good defense. And when you put in like a defense and that crowd, I think Auburn, granted they have talented athletes, but that's going to be tough for them in that scenario. So I do like Penn State. But I always love these games, like the Big Ten SEC type games. And I think Auburn is down a little bit. I think maybe a few years ago, you could say it's like the third best team in the Big Ten against the third best team in the SEC. But I do think for sure Auburn is no longer the third best team in the SEC. I think they're maybe 5th or 6th. I don't know. They're ranked 22nd. Penn State's ranked 10th. So hard to say. But I like Penn State in this game. And then the other game I wanted to address, not so much who's going to win, but Florida and Alabama line was like 15.5. Now it's down to 14. And I'm loving it even more on Locks of the Week. I mean, do we think that Florida keeps this game close, or is Alabama going to literally roll in this game?
Gosh, I don't know. That's such a tough. Like my instinct says roll because they rolled over Miami, and then who do they play? Like Citadel or Mercer or some poor small
you know what
school.
Happened in that game though? Mercer's, I think it was their head coach said that Mercer's going to cover the line, and by golly, they did.
Well, what was the line? Like 300?
The line was like 30 something, and I can't remember what it was like. And they covered it because they got a touchdown in the fourth quarter.
Of course,
and, Saban was
backdoor cover.
Yeah, rattling out his players like he was not happy. So as far as this game, I actually think that Alabama's going to roll big time. Florida to me is a little concerning, and it's the same issue they had a few years back where they didn't have a quarterback. They don't have a quarterback right now. Emory Jones. 2 interceptions week 1, 2 interceptions week 2. There's rumors of a quarterback controversy, them possibly going to a freshman quarterback. Jones is a great runner, but he's not going to run against Alabama's athletes. I think when I see like this line, and like I've always said this, like college football, college basketball, college sports in general are harder to bet than pro sports. I mean, betting in general is like, if you think you know what you're doing, it's hard. Like you're making calculated guesses. There's no one that is, has a formula for all these games, especially this season. But I feel like less confident betting on any college game. But especially when the line is like 2 touchdowns, that scares me. I usually say stay away if it's like 14 or more. But I am like borderline mortgage betting this game just because I think that Alabama is going to completely dominate Florida. And don't think that Alabama didn't remember that Florida played them tough last season in the SEC title game. Like a 7-point game, I think it was, one of the closest games Alabama played all of last season. I think Emory Jones, or if they play the freshman, they're going to have a hard time passing on Alabama. I think Bryce Young, who's been a much better passer than many people said he was supposed to be a runner. He can pass the ball pretty darn good. So I think Alabama's going to dominate Florida in this game. It's in the swamp, I think. Doesn't matter. Tide, I think, wins by maybe 3 touchdowns. I think it's going to be. And I'm mad at Florida because last week on Locks of the Week, I put them down like minus 29 against South Florida. And I think South Florida backdoor, I wouldn't have lost. What is it called? It's a backdoor cover, but it would have been a wash.
Yeah.
I think it was like 29, and they made it to 22. and it's because Florida had like several turnovers. And the fact that South Florida lost 45-0 to NC State, who you were high on. I had Mississippi State over NC State. Got that one right. I know it's hard to compare like this game, that game, but Florida really underwhelming last week, and it does not bode well for them going up against Alabama. I mean, honestly, Tom, like, if you told me, let me ask you this right now. I'll ask you a question and see what you say, because you know what I'm going to answer. Right now, if you had to bet your mortgage, which you're not going to, and I'm not going to. But if you had to pick Alabama going undefeated and winning the championship versus Alabama not going undefeated, what would you take? Because I've got Alabama going undefeated. I feel way more safe in saying they win every game versus them dropping a game at some point.
The only game that gives me pause is that I know they're going to be playing Georgia for the SEC championship. And doesn't that take place in Atlanta?
Yeah,
typically, so it's close. So I'll go Alabama. I'll go Alabama. It's not as secure of a pick as you have it. That's how I'll play it.
Fair. By the way, I think Alabama and Georgia are probably going to meet each other twice. Like, I mean, almost
That'd be
for
fun.
sure, because what's crazy is they'll probably meet in the SEC title game. Then they'll either meet the next week or the week after, because I think Alabama's going to get the 1 seed. Georgia will be a 3 or 4. So, and that's, I actually think that bodes well in Georgia's favor for maybe getting a 3, just because I don't know that they're going to want to put them back-to-back weeks against each other. So I think like Alabama beats Georgia, then Georgia somehow gets a 3, and then they meet again in the national championship game, and Alabama wins again. And how about Alabama?
We can only hope.
All the Alabama quarterbacks. You had Jalen Hurts, Tua, and Mac Jones all played together. All started week 1 in the NFL. All did pretty good. Hurts did great, actually. Tua got a win. He was solid. And then Jones was pretty solid. He should have beaten Tua, quite frankly, but his running back fumbled the game away late. Hats off to Alabama. I'm impressed with what they've done, because it used to be that they won with their defense and running game. But Nick Saban himself said it. That's not how you win anymore. You win with wide receivers and quarterbacks. And Alabama now has turned into, they can still play good defense and run the ball well because it's Alabama. But they've clearly adjusted to the modern game. We've seen with Smith, Waddle, all these receivers, obviously the 3 quarterbacks in a row. They know that they need to pass the ball. And it used to be a team like a running QB, Johnny Manziel. I know, great passer, beat him, Cam Newton back in the day because they had the better quarterback. Well, now like Alabama has the better quarterback just about almost every game, if not every game they play. So teams are toast. Like, college football is Alabama. I'm boring. I know. I'm going with the Tide. I'm going with the favorite. But hey, you're rocking their colors, and it's working pretty well.
I am.
So
it's more of my high school alma mater, St. Ignatius, of like a maroon more than a crimson, I would say. But fair. Close enough. What do we have next? I don't have the rundown because my internet is poor.
Yeah, I think we're done with like the more talkative segments. I think we've got locks of the week, right?
Sounds good.
So first off, I would like to say, like, we did this thing where we tied season 1 with locks of the week, and we threw in some random game, and we kept trying to pick random games, and we kept agreeing on what they were. And I was tired after about 4 games. I swear to you, I thought that Rutgers would cover against Syracuse, but I'm like, why not? Let's throw it in. So we tied season 1 of Locks of the Week.
I'm good with sharing the championship. I'm good with sharing. I don't need all this pie for me. I'm happy to share. It's a big pie.
We'll share. We'll share the championship. Good start for the show on season 2, particularly Tom Castleman. 3-1 in 1 week. We talked about this right before the show off air. Tom got very lucky on a few lines, but I'll hit on the lines he easily hit first. So you had Rams minus 7.5 over the Bears. Correct. The Rams winning 33-14. Eagles plus 3.5 at the Falcons. That's one of those lines that Vegas missed really, really poorly. Like, that does not happen that often. They miss by that much. The Eagles winning 32-6. And then he had Panthers -5 over the Jets. The Panthers winning 19-14, so got a wash there. That line closed at 5.5, so would have lost had it not closed. And then the other line, since we did this earlier in the week, Tom had he had the 49ers -7.5 over the Lions. That line then moved to 8, 8.5, and as high as 9, I think. I think it was 8.5 at the end. So there, the 49ers winning 41-33. So a lot of people who bet on Sunday were furious at that late comeback the Lions had, lost them a lot of money. But Tom Castleman got that game earlier in the week, got the cover by a half point on that one. And then he missed NC State -2.5.
That was pretty bad.
Mississippi State, 24-10 Mississippi State, 3-1-1. Good start, Tom. I think last season you had like the really, really bad start. And you had,
it was horrendous.
Horrendous start, and you worked your way back to about 500. And like, but it's hard. Like when you lose, like it's the same as like an NBA game. When you're up like when you get down like 15, 20 points, then you get back down to 2 or 3. But then it's just hard to like get over the top because
stay over the hump. Yeah, we both had that problem.
Yeah,
the entire show had that problem.
Yeah, so like we were like right there at 500, and I think I don't know if you were over 500 at one point. I was over 500 for a few weeks, I think, but we were like right at the 500 mark. But we started off much better. 3-1 for you, 3-1-1 for you. I was 3-2. I also had the Rams -7.5 over the Bears. The Rams winning 34-14. And then I had the Texans +2.5 against the Jaguars. 37-21, winning by 16. So a couple bets that I was not sweating. And then I had the Florida game where I had a -28 over South Florida. 42-20, 22-point win. The backdoor cover, missed that one. Then I missed the Bucks -8 over the Cowboys. The Bucks winning by just 2. And then Michigan -6 over Washington. Michigan winning by 21. So I did actually really, really well with my 3 wins. Like really well. Like they all covered easily. And my 2 losses were relatively close. So I could say that I had a pretty good week 1. I needed 1 more touchdown by the Bucks and 1 more touchdown by Florida. So clearly the state of Florida did me no favors. And that's probably why I'm going to go against the state of Florida this week. As for Drew Brackett had the worst week. The only one under 500 week 1, season 2. Drew was 2-3. But he actually did pretty good when it came to NFL. His Premier League soccer over-under, he's cooling off. He hit all these back in the day. Under EPL, it was automatic. He is cooling off. Crystal Palace, Tottenham, under 2.5 goals. Crystal Palace wins 3-0. This game was 0-0 at the half. I think it was about 0-0 like the first 60 minutes. And Crystal Palace scored like maybe 3 goals the last like 20, 30 minutes of the match. I think the third goal came in the 80-something minute. So kind of a bad beat there for Mr. Brackett. And then this one he missed really badly. Italy, Lithuania, under 2.5 goals. World Cup qualifying. Italy winning 5-0. They were up 4-0 at halftime, I think. So that one just went completely south for Drew. But then he did pretty good in the NFL. He got the Cowboys covering 8 against the Bucks. We all picked that game, or like me and him did, actually. And then Bengals +3 against the Vikings. The Bengals getting that big overtime win, 27-24. And he had the Giants +3 against the Broncos. He missed that one pretty badly as well. So, like, 2-3 for Drew. So, in the cellar, like last season. But we'll see what he has planned for the rest of the year. What do you have this week? I think me and you are going to have a lot of similar picks, and Drew's going to disagree with us. So I think it's going to be another bad week for Drew Brackett.
All right, so I've got 2 games with road favorites. Give me the Rams -4 over the Colts, and give me the Chiefs -4 at Baltimore. So those are 2 of my NFL games. I went 4 NFL and 1 baseball. So the other 2 NFLs, I have Bengals covering the 3-point spread against the Bears. I'm going to fade this team so hard. Yeah,
it's a
Bengals cover
win-win.
+3.
It's a win-win, man. If the Bears like lose, then you get your pick right. The Bears win, I get my, or you're happy the Bears won.
I
Excuse my
suppose so.
talking. But
I suppose so.
I mean, we both faded the Bears week 1. Do you think they're going to win this game? I know the line is 3. Like, do you actually think the Bengals win outright, or is it just
no? I think Cincinnati can win outright. I was not at all encouraged by what I saw on Sunday night, so we'll see if it gets any better. Basically, I'm not going to feel good about the Bears winning anything until Justin Fields is starting a quarterback. Let's see. The other line I have is I'll have Cowboys covering +3 against the LA Chargers. And then I'll go ahead. It's been a while. I'll dip my toes in the baseball betting. I'll give Cincinnati Reds -1.5 runs at Pittsburgh on the 15th, on September 15th. Vladimir Gutierrez is the starting pitcher. I think Pittsburgh won tonight, but I'm not going to go with recency bias on this one. I'm sticking with the Reds -1.5 runs at even money.
Wow. How about that? So I've got a couple of the same as you, or one of the same. I've got Rams -3.5 at the Colts. I think this is the easiest pick of the week. If you're going to throw down big money on a game, this is the one to do it. I've got, Indy offense struggled at home versus Seattle, losing 28-16. Seattle, not a very good defense anymore. Carson Wentz still not fitting in well. No T.Y. Hilton hurts them. And Rams have that top defense from last year, but Matthew Stafford makes their offense more dangerous. 21 of 26, 321 pass yards, 3 touchdowns. Week 1 against the Bears. But let's not complicate this too much. I know it's a road game, but the Rams won week 1 by 20. The Colts lost week 1 by 12. So I think the Rams winning by 4 or more is pretty safe. Other line I like, Chiefs -3.5 over the Ravens. We talked about this earlier in the show. I think the Chiefs are 3-0 against the Ravens the last 3 seasons. They've won by more than 3 in 2 of the games and by 3 in the other. So 2 wins and a tie if you look at recent matchups. Baltimore doesn't pass the ball well enough to keep up with Kansas City in a high-scoring game. Mahomes comes out in these big games. I talked about this earlier, undefeated against Mayfield, Jackson, Allen, Herbert. It's like he almost wants to prove a point against some of these other quarterbacks, these young quarterbacks. I think also pretty good against Deshaun Watson, beat him in the playoffs. Mitchell Trubisky, obviously, not a good player, but he proved, he wants to prove to all these players that he's the best young quarterback. So I like the Chiefs offense. Baltimore very banged up. We talked about this, banged up on the defense, banged up with the running game. So how do you beat Kansas City? Well, you run the ball by keeping them off the field, and you have to have a good defense to stop them. So Baltimore, I think, is going to have a good defense when they all get it settled. But I think Derek Carr put up over 400 yards against them. I know it went to overtime. I know the Raiders didn't run the ball well, but man, if Derek Carr puts up over 400 on you, I'd be concerned facing Mahomes, Hill, and Kelsey. And then the other line that I really, really like for football, and I guess, how many did you lift off? Because we're going to do our 3 NFL picks and 2 others. But I did
4 NFL picks.
You did 4? Okay, so you did 4 NFL picks, and then the 1 baseball. So I've got 4 NFL picks also. I've got the Saints -4 at the Panthers. This is another one that I feel pretty good about. Jameis Winston, is he going to throw 5 touchdowns, no picks again? No, probably not. But does he have to against the Panthers? I don't think so. The Panthers beating the Jets by 5, not all that impressive. Not all that impressive, even though Tony Romo loves Zach Wilson. Not all that impressive. The Saints got Alvin Kamara, a great defense. They beat Rodgers and the Packers 38-3. I mean, that's dominant. And keep this in mind. The Saints have beaten the Panthers 4 straight in this series, 8 of the last 9 games. The last 2 games at Carolina, New Orleans won 33-7, 42-10. I know it's a bit different players, but some of the guys are there in that recent matchups. I'm going with the recency bias. sort of the matchups we've seen with the Chiefs and Ravens. We've seen the Chiefs dominate. We've seen the Saints dominate the Panthers. So in those points, 3 to 4 points, not very big lines. I feel good about the Saints and Chiefs both winning by a touchdown or more. Then I like the Cardinals minus 4.5 over the Vikings. Kyler Murray, 289 pass yards, 4 touchdowns, and a 38-13 win over the Titans. The Vikings losing 27-3 against Cincinnati. Joe Burrow had a big game. Minnesota's defense struggled against the Bengals. Probably going to struggle more against the Cardinals. Murray, Hopkins, Kirk, all those targets. I'm still not sold on the Cardinals' consistency, but I'm going to buy into their early season success and having a good stretch early on in the season. Then finally, we just talked about this in the last segment, college football. Alabama minus 14 at Florida. Emory Jones, the Gators starting quarterback, 2 picks week 1, 2 picks week 2, more of a runner, not a traditional passer. Alabama's defense is going to have their fun with him. Bryce Young is going to dominate through the air. Alabama wins by more than 2 touchdowns. No problem. Bryce Young, man, he's the real deal. Like, watch this game just to watch this guy play and look for Alabama to say, like, hey, Florida, you kept it close last year. We're going to roll on you this year. So those are my 5 locks of the week. Let me get Drew's locks in real fast here. So let's see what.
Really quickly, a question. It's like we have 2 games where I think you found different lines. Should we both have the same line that we're going for? Because I just go based off Bovada. Like, if you have a better number, should we enter it?
What line did you? Which one are you referencing?
I had 4 points for both the Rams and the Chiefs off Bovada, but like I don't shop my numbers around. So should we just do 3.5 for those on mine?
Yes. Let me check what it is now because those lines are changing because.
Okay.
Let's see. NFL, I'm pulling up on my DraftKings app. So
yeah, because I know that's who you go to, but I don't
3.5 for the Rams at the Colts.
Okay.
And what was the other one? 3.5 for the Chiefs. Let's go with this one. Let's make it easier on you, Tom. We'll be nice to you. We'll go 3.5 on both.
Well, it's either 3.5 on both or 4 on both. So
no, we'll go 3.5.
We'll give ourselves a better number there.
You know, I think
I'm just not able to shop it around as much.
Right.
I don't have any gambling accounts.
Right. That's one of the things in sports betting that I think people get too caught up about, a half point. Like baseball, okay, half point matters in baseball or soccer. But if we're talking about basketball or football, very rarely does that half point matter that much. Although we saw that 1 point mattered quite a lot for you and your picks last week. But I'm not too worried. We'll do 3.5 officially, but I think that our teams cover that no problem. As for Drew's picks, Drew went like very against me, so that's interesting. He had the Bears minus 3, so he goes against you there. Then he had the Panthers plus 3.5 going against me, and actually that line might have moved to 4, so he actually sent it at a worse line. But maybe we'll let him have the Panthers at 4.
Yeah, we'll give him Panthers at 4, yeah.
Then he had the Ravens plus 3.5. So he basically went 2 games against me, 1 game against you, and I agree with your pick, by the way. And then he had the Steelers minus 5.5, which that one might hit. And then, of course, he had under in soccer, Burnley and Arsenal under 2.5 on September 18th. So we'll see. We'll see. A lot of upsets, as I'll have in Statement of the Week. So he may get some upsets. It's just like you draw it up on paper, man, and that's just not how it ends up sometimes. But before we get to Statements of the Week, sports trivia, I've got a good question for you. I don't know if you want to also do one for me. Or just
I did not prepare anything. I've been fried the past couple of days, so I'm just going to enjoy.
Yeah, you're going to enjoy. Okay. So we'll probably start talking baseball again on the show the next few weeks as the season winds down. So I thought we'd get a little baseball trivia in since we didn't do baseball last week, didn't do baseball this week. So I actually heard this trivia question first 2 weeks ago. So I had it prepared for a possible question last week, but we had you ask it. So here's this question. And I'll have you maybe make one guess before I start giving clues. I don't think you'll get it, but what MLB player has grounded out into the most double plays in the history of the game. And if you reason it out, it makes sense.
Okay. So my first guess is Joey Votto.
No.
Okay.
But I would say that you're kind of close with him. You've got the right position, and you've got an active player.
Ooh, active player. Okay.
Active player. So this guy is really, really good hitter, historically at least. Really good average hitter. Really good contact hitter. Doesn't strike out much. Also hits for power and doesn't strike out much. And not a very fast runner. He's not like a Molina, but he's definitely like he's not swift of foot per se. So when you think about this, it makes sense. Like when I heard the stat, I was like, that makes sense. Really, really good player.
Like Albert Pujols, maybe.
Yes, nicely done, Tom Castleman.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Not bad.
Yeah. And
needed some help, but yeah.
Cal Ripken is second, by the way, on that list.
That I would never have gotten.
Yeah.
Like it makes sense because he played so many games.
Right, so many games in a row.
Uh-oh. Yeah, I'm a little delayed. Possibly. I think I'm delayed.
Maybe do that thing where like you unhop a video and then you hop back on.
Yeah, let me try that real quick.
Man, we haven't had issues in weeks. Like we had minor things here and there, but we've been pretty lucky.
Mm-hmm.
This is a bad week. Maybe you should go back to that thing. What's that thing you do where you look too high on the screen and that's your most...
Oh, that's where I just use the laptop as opposed to using the monitor. Probably, yeah. Because I think I'm still a little bit unsynced. I'll just jump into statement really quickly.
Sure.
The San Francisco Giants just celebrated clinching a playoff bid. But even though they have the best record in baseball, they can't really celebrate having clinched the division or even a full playoff series. They still have to contend with the Los Angeles Dodgers for who's going to get that one-game play-in. I understand this makes baseball more exciting for more markets, but it's an absolute travesty that a team that plays as well as the Dodgers have, as well as the San Francisco Giants have, are essentially in a one-game playoff, a coin flip essentially, because baseball can be pretty random. You can have one pitcher on one day who all of a sudden just pitches out of his mind. Something like the most baseball-y thing is going to be like Adam Wainwright outduels Walker Buehler and the Cardinals win a wild card spot and they go on and they like end up representing the National League in the World Series. Like that's absolutely not the best team to be doing that, but that feels like that could very well take place. So as much as I get more eyeballs on this game, for MLB playoffs, the MLB playoffs are exciting enough as they are. I think 3 division winners and then the best of the rest is the best way to do it. It's the most equitable way of doing it. And if these other teams want to have a shot at a wild card, build a better team.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's just such a no-brainer. It's just ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Like I feel so bad for the Giants or even the Dodgers. I mean, actually at this point, like, the way we've been talking about it is that it's going to be the Giants, but the Giants are winning that division. At this point, it looks like it might be the Dodgers.
Yeah.
And it's like you said, Walker Buehler and Adam Wainwright, which, by the way, Adam Wainwright has had like sort of like a rejuvenatory season this season. Like, look up the stats and see how good Adam Wainwright's doing this season. Like, he's been phenomenal. Like, and he was ready to retire a couple years ago. Like, hats off to Adam Wainwright. I'm a Cubs fan. But, like, I appreciate what Adam Wainwright has done. A really, really good pitcher. But as far as what you said, absolutely. I think, like, it's not fair. You can't have the second best record in baseball, in all of baseball, counting the American League, and be in the wild card. That's completely, absolutely ridiculous. I could not agree more. Let me check one thing here. Yeah, that's the right setting. Sometimes in the headphones you hear an echo. We've actually done. I'll tell you this. We've been really, really good with this at-home setup. Like you've went in and out recent weeks a little bit with your new setup, but for the most part, like we've actually been pretty good on this show in terms of our internet connection and our quality. Like, knock on wood, this is probably the most issues we've had in quite a while, if not ever. So it happens.
Hopefully next week will be better. I'll change it up for next week.
Okay, we'll change it up for next week. I mean, I think you sound fine. If someone's just listening and not looking at you, the show sounds great. If they're like locked in on the screen.
That's advice that I generally hand out to people. Just listen to me. Don't look. You'll be better off.
Right. Yeah, about the same for myself. But yeah, I agree. I think it's not fair. It's unfortunate. We'll see if they go back and revisit that. I think the NBA did that years ago. And NBA is really good at handling these things. Like, NBA used to be like the division winner gets the higher seed in the playoffs, but now they do it solely based on record in the NBA. So I wonder if MLB chooses to do that. I get what they're doing with the one-game playoff. I don't know that I necessarily agree with it. But if they're going to do it, at least do it where it's like the two worst teams to make the playoffs, not one of the best teams. And honestly, like, the Padres have faded now, and we're not even sure if they'll make it. But earlier in the season, that wild card game looked like it might be the second and third seed in the National League. That would have been even worse. So, and that honestly could happen with how good those teams all are, with San Diego underachieving this season. It could happen next year. So, yeah, get rid of that. My statement of the week is it's sort of more of like a statistic. I know usually I have something really bold. I couldn't really think of something. So I will continue the theme that I've been preaching on this show. The year of the upsets. The upsets keep on coming like they never have before in all sports. So this week, Tom, and my statement / salute is I love to see this. It's exciting. It's good for sports. Good for the NFL. The most upsets, best record for underdogs we've had in 38 years. Do you know what the underdogs went week 1?
Rough math. I don't know. They went like 10-6.
So very close. 9-7, the underdogs.
Okay.
The first time since 1983 in all NFL seasons, the underdogs have had a winning record. First time since 1983 at 9-7. On top of that, we had 12 underdogs cover the betting spread in week 1, which is the most of any opening week in the Super Bowl era. So since betting has existed, we've never had more underdogs cover the spread. I don't know if that means that this is going to lead into week 2. Is it a theme, or are we going to see the opposite? But, like, again, I didn't put them on locks of the week. I'm not going to bet them, I don't think. But, man, when I see those lines, like those 12-point lines, 11-point lines, like Tampa Bay minus 11.5 over the Falcons, like the Browns minus 11 or whatever over the Texans, my first thought is, like, take your Texans, take your Falcons. I'm not saying they're going to win the game. That's not going to happen, but they are probably going to cover. I think this is exciting for the NFL, and it speaks to where we are in sports right now. I think across all the sports, there's a lot more parity than we've seen. I do think the Chiefs and Bucks, probably the two top teams in the NFL right now, and we did have a few blowouts, but for the most part, like, as they say, any given Sunday. That's what it is, and it's exciting. I think it's good for the league. I think it's good for sports, and I'm wildly looking forward to this NFL season towards our picks can pick 'em, our fantasy leagues, and just the predictions we make on the show. Because I'd like to think. I mean, not think. I'll be honest. Maybe we're bragging, but I think we both know our sports, especially football, NFL football. We watch it. We are educated. We make educated guesses, and as do the professionals on ESPN, NFL, CBS. But you're making a calculated guess, because at this point, like, any one of these games just literally could go any way, and that's just so exciting. And I'm just so happy to have the NFL back, and I'm happy to have it back with fans in the stands. I hope people get vaccinated. I hope we do this as safely as possible. But I think I think there's just something different with having the crowds there. It's just like a different
Hmm.
feel to it. And it's like this NFL season, like it feels like sports are fully back. And I am looking forward to it. I mean, the NFL is probably my favorite sports league. I know that's everyone's favorite sports league. That's not saying much. Like I like NFL, soccer, basketball, tennis, also maybe about as much. Baseball, maybe a little bit lower than those. But I think NBA and MLB, there's so many games, even soccer. Like I enjoy the Champions League, but there's nothing like that weekly NFL Sunday and like Monday Night Football. It's just like it's so much to look forward to. So my salute and statement is like, let's go NFL season. Let's go upsets. And hopefully the Bears are doing the upsetting. The Chiefs are not getting upset. That's all I'll say.
Well, really quick before we sign off, I do have one salute. My mom's
Sure.
birthday is tomorrow, Wednesday, September 15th.
Whose
So happy
birthday?
birthday, my mom.
Your mom. And isn't your birthday coming up?
My birthday was yesterday. I'm now an old 30-year-old man.
Wait. Hold on. First off, how did I not realize that? Is your birthday like official on Facebook? Or did I just not log into Facebook yesterday?
It's not. I'm down. I was down to 5 people wishing me a happy birthday yesterday, and I'm happy about that.
Okay,
It's almost it's a reverse game for me. It's how low can I go?
All right, hold on. All right, so I'm gonna write this down right now.
No, don't write it down. No, because then that's running counter to the bit.
You'll be up to 6 people next year. September 13th, Tom Castleman birthday. Oh my god. Okay, so you are. Well, you're not a Libra. You're what sign are you right now? What is
Virgo?
It? Virgo.
I'm Virgo.
Excellent. Virgo. Well, happy birthday! And you're
thank you.
30 now, right? Like you're in the 30 club.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah, you've joined the 30 club. So, how about that? When you're going real fast before we get off here, I know you got to get up early tomorrow. You're celebrating your birthday, I think, because we were talking about recording Thursdays. This is a Tuesday. What are you doing? You're doing something special? The Chicago Art Museum or something? What was it?
So we're going to the Museum of Science and Industry, and we're going to see specifically the Marvel exhibit that is being held there.
The Marvel, like superheroes?
Yeah, like the Marvel comic. It's like this big, huge exhibit that's been going on from like I want to say like spring, and it ends in October. So if you want to go to the Museum of Science and Industry and check out the giant Marvel exhibit they have set up, I've heard it's very, very good.
Oh my gosh, I just might have to. Honestly, I think I might do that because I have to actually get my Bulgarian like nationalism card updated, and like the embassy is in Chicago, and I've actually been meaning to go to the city for like months now. Like my card is outdated, like obviously like I'm not doing something in Bulgaria right now. Like it's not an emergency, but I would just like to get the updated card, and that could be like a fun combo trip. And I gotta look at my bank. Like I don't know if your bank offers this. Like I have Bank of America. They offer like something like a free museum trip a month or every other month or something. But it's like one museum, so it's whatever museum happens to be that month. Like you get in for free.
Well, the Museum of Science and Industry does have free days, and then you just have to pay for like the specialty exhibit. So that's what we're taking advantage of this week.
Exhibit. Right.
It is, yeah.
Well, you enjoy it. You tell me how it goes real fast.
We'll do.
I think we have the same one because I've talked to you on this subject, I believe. But favorite Marvel character? I think it's Iron Man for both of us.
Yes.
Or you have someone else. Who's your other favorite?
It's Iron Man, but the very close second is Chris Hemsworth's Thor, especially after what he did in Thor Ragnarok and then into Endgame and Infinity War.
Oh my God.
Reverse.
When
I really enjoyed him.
The Fat Thor. Oh my God.
I didn't like what they did with Fat Thor, but I think Infinity War Thor was my favorite because of the depth and the weight that he carries from feeling like he's let down the entire universe. Like as far as like a character arc goes, like Tony Stark is a great one. I also think Thor is a great one too. So it's Stark 1, Thor is a very close 1A.
Yeah, I love Fat Thor, by the way, but just comedic gold. So I think we agree. I probably agree with those rankings. So yeah, Tom and I agree a lot. Drew and I disagree a lot more. It's like, and it's not surprising our locks of the week picks finished tied for the year because we had quite a lot of the same picks, and I think we have 1 or 2 this week as well. So I think 2.
Yeah.
So hopefully things go well for us. It'll be easier for me to track, and we'll be back next week. Happy birthday to Tom and Tom's mom. So you guys are 2 days apart, your birthdays?
Yep.
Wow. Congratulations. Well, you make sure you tell her from me personally, happy birthday, Mrs. Castleman. I remember when I first met her at your wedding a few years ago. Just such a pleasure. Like, wonderful, wonderful mother. So anyways, that'll do it for Salute Your Sports. We'll be back next week, and I think we'll get the internet connection kinks worked out. I know we've both got a really busy week. At one point, I almost thought about restarting the show, but we were too far in. So we got it done, and we'll have hopefully a clearer picture next week. Have a good day, everyone.